So you've no doubt clicked on this video because you want to hear my thoughts on the Acolyte. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I can't tell you what my feelings are, and the reason for that is I didn't watch it. I apologize up front for the clickbaity title. That was a low blow. But the reason I did that was to point out what a lot of popular YouTubers are doing right now. They claim to hate this show, scratching their heads as to why or how Disney can continue making shows when they continue to decline in quality, and yet they never stop talking about it. See, one of the good things about being a smaller channel is that I don't have to worry about following popular trends just so I can get views. There's only about 50 people who will probably watch this video anyways, so I might as well just say what I feel like saying. No matter how bad you think a movie might be, if it makes money, chances are the studio is going to capitalize on it. The same can be said about YouTubers. I have yet to see one positive review on The Acolyte, and yet everybody's talking about it. It doesn't matter how negatively it's being received. By talking about it, good or bad, the millions of subscribers for those channels are going to keep the conversation going, which is going to help fuel Disney and Lucasfilm to keep pumping out more. Sure, I'm sure they'd rather have critically acclaimed shows, but we live in a day and age where bad is the new good. Some popular YouTuber with 1 million subscribers talks about how badly something sucks, and then everyone goes to watch just to see how bad it really is. And that's the problem. Once you hit the play button, you're actively watching their content, and that's good news for Disney. In 2016, there was a movie that came out that year called Ghostbusters. It wasn't called Ghostbusters 2016, that's just the name everyone gave it to differentiate it from the good Ghostbusters. You know, the one that was actually funny.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
I bring this up because that year a popular YouTuber by the name James Rolfe, you might know him as the Angry Video Game Nerd, made waves by announcing he wasn't going to see it. I'll come back to this point a little later. But all these YouTubers keep saying how this last episode of The Acolyte is the one that broke the camel's back. They're all saying that this is the thing that ruined Star Wars forever. Really? This one episode is the one that did it for you, huh? I was 5 months old when Return of the Jedi first came out to theaters in 1983. I didn't get to experience it in theaters upon its initial release, but the Star Wars trilogy was one of those things that really boosted VHS sales in the 80s. It was one of the most popular movie series ever, and seeing them as a kid, even though I didn't understand the plot or the character motivations, it still left an impact on me. And most people from that generation can attest to the same thing. For years, Star Wars was just composed of 3 really good movies, and any media surrounding the franchise revolved around those 3 films. Of course, as news spread throughout the 90s that George Lucas was getting ready to return to the franchise, fans young and old were impatiently waiting for the day when they would finally get to see a brand new Star Wars film. Parents who were kids when the original films came out could now take their own kids to see them, while teenagers like me, who grew up watching them on VHS, could finally see what we hadn't been able to see the first time around. My first taste of this wasn't The Phantom Menace, but 2 years earlier, in 1997, when George Lucas released the Star Wars Special Editions. Now, you have to put yourself in 1997. It was a different time. For those of us who hadn't gotten the chance to see these movies in the theater, this was really exciting. It's common now with things like Fathom events to be able to see your favorite movies on the big screen, but back then it really wasn't that common. Once in a while, if a movie was celebrating an anniversary, you might get a special one-time engagement. Well, 1997 was the 20th anniversary of the original film, but we weren't just getting that one movie. No, we were going to be able to witness the entire Star Wars trilogy in theaters, with some brand new special effects and remastered picture and sound. It was a fan's dream come true. Keep in mind, when the special editions came out, we didn't realize that these were going to be the only way to see the movies from now on. I just thought they would come out to theaters, we'd get some nice new special effects to help sell the re-release, and that would be the end of it. Little did we know that Lucas would continue to add to the films well into the 2010s. I don't remember the criticisms about all the added stuff back then. People were just excited to be able to see the movies in theaters again. And it got us even more pumped about the upcoming prequels. At the end of Return of the Jedi, we got our first ever glimpse at the planet Coruscant, which didn't exist in the film prior to 1997. But the thing is, I'm sure there were plenty of fans who didn't necessarily like all the changes, especially the ones made to Return of the Jedi. And you would have thought that that would have been the final nail in the coffin for Star Wars. A movie I once loved now has a bunch of CGI dinosaurs in it? No thanks. But the special editions were very successful, and then we got The Phantom Menace, the first new Star Wars movie in 16 years. I can't begin to explain how exciting this was. I'm sure you've heard all the stories of people camping out in front of the theaters for months in advance of the film being released, taking off work so they could be among the first in line to see it. People would pay full price to see a movie they didn't really care about just so they could see the teaser trailer for the new Star Wars. The Austin Powers trailer blatantly told you, if you could only see one movie that summer, see Star Wars. It was little surprise when the movie came out and it failed to meet people's expectations. Say what you want about it now, but The Phantom Menace was hands down the most hyped movie of all time. And a lot of people hated it. You would have thought that The Phantom Menace, as well as the other two prequels, would have been the final nail in the coffin. Jar Jar Binks? No, thank you. Then, in 2008, 3 years after the final prequel came out, after Lucas assured everyone that he was done with the franchise, out came the Clone Wars animated movie, and that one got lukewarm or bad reviews too. Even I couldn't get too excited for it, and despite people saying they were done with Star Wars once and for all, it spawned an entire TV series that went on for years. In 2012, Lucas finally announced that he was tired of being ripped apart by overprivileged man-babies who couldn't let go of their jaded childhoods, and he turned over the Star Wars reins to Disney, basically saying, "I'm done, let's see what you can do with it." And everyone who hated the prequels was like, "Finally! Let someone who knows what they're doing handle this franchise. Disney's going to save Star Wars." And then, 3 short years later, we got The Force Awakens, and it seemed like everyone who felt disillusioned by Star Wars at that point was back on board. And so was Harrison Ford. And so was Mark Hamill. And they even managed to clean up Carrie Fisher and get her back in front of the camera too. For that year at least, it seemed like Star Wars was back. But then The Last Jedi came along. It divided the fan base like nothing else. And for many people, this was the movie that ruined Star Wars. Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy had finally done it. This was the end for Star Wars. Until Rise of Skywalker came out in 2019. Remember those debates people used to have in the early 2000s about which was worse, Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones?
I say Phantom Menace sucked more.
Well, this was part 2 of that discussion. Either way, by this point, it seemed like interest in the series was quickly deteriorating once again. But there might still be hope. A little show called The Mandalorian was taking the world by storm. It was small, it was creative, and it was what a lot of fans tired of space wizards and Skywalker bullshit were clamoring for, and all was right with the world. Until the Book of Boba Fett came along, ruining a once popular character and relying on the Mandalorian's title character to help keep it afloat. Then we got Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the level of quality we were seeing in The Mandalorian was quickly diminishing. It was bringing back memorable actors like Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor, but something was missing. The show had an unusually cheap feel to it. The writing felt conceited, overly convenient, and at times offensively stupid. And for many fans, this was it. Obi-Wan Kenobi had ruined Star Wars. Then Andor came along. I didn't watch it, but apparently the 3 people who did said it was pretty good, but by that point no one, not even this little prequel defender, really gave a rat's ass anymore. Then the 3rd season of Mandalorian started, and from the first episode it just didn't seem to have a direction. Mando was just going on a bunch of fetch quests like in a video game, and then by episode 3 we weren't even following Mando anymore. So I didn't bother, and for many fans, that was it. That was the end of Star Wars. And when people didn't think it could get any worse, we got Ahsoka. I didn't even try with this one. I just watched the YouTube reviews and just said, well, I guess I'm glad I didn't waste my time with that. And that was it. It seemed like Ahsoka had finally killed Star Wars. Until the Acolyte came along. And now, finally, after all this time, this is the thing that killed Star Wars. You know, after saying all that, I guarantee that next week all those YouTubers who claim that Episode 3 of The Acolyte ruined Star Wars forever will be back for Episode 4, saying the same thing. Do you see what I'm getting at? It seems that no matter what happens, no one will ever be happy with Star Wars. Because if it's good, no one watches. And the only time people watch is when something is reportedly so bad that they have to see it for themselves. But I value my time. I don't want to watch something that's bad. That seems like a really big waste of time. And maybe Acolyte isn't as bad as everyone says, but you know what?
I can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking my head up a bull's ass, but I'd rather take the butcher's word for it.
The thing is, Star Wars was a series of films I saw as a kid, and as a teenager, revisiting those films with a slightly fresher pair of eyes was magical. But now that I'm in my 40s, whenever I see those movies, I enjoy them, but that magic is lost. Maybe it's because I've seen them hundreds of times. Maybe it's because I know so much about the industry and how they created all that stuff that the magic just wore off. Maybe I have so many adult responsibilities these days that the fact that the new Star Wars show sucks doesn't really matter to me. The The thing is, Star Wars will always have that element of childhood nostalgia, and any fan who says otherwise is deluding themselves. That's why The Force Awakens was received as positively as it was. Everyone complained that it was just a soft reboot of A New Hope, but everyone saw it nonetheless. When that movie came out, people loved it. That's why it made over $2 billion. Anytime someone tries to do something different, they complain. And I haven't seen The Acolyte, but from what I've seen of some of the other shows, the writing and the production value probably is pretty lackluster at this point. But it's not always on the showrunners. Some of this is just because of the fan base. We all want Star Wars to be good, and as many times as Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm, or whoever has dropped the ball, it's hard to accept that they are intentionally trying to ruin Star Wars. I don't think anyone tries to go out and make something bad deliberately. Making movies or TV or anything is really hard. Why would you waste all that time, money, and resources on something you know people aren't going to want to see? The thing is, people today are very divided, maybe more so than any time in recent history. And while I'm tired of hearing the word woke being thrown around all the time, that's one term that everyone uses to describe the current state of Star Wars. And while you may not like how everything appears woke, there's an entire generation of people who have been brought up to feel that this is just the normal way of thinking. So how do you change something that big? Going back to what I said earlier about James Rolfe and his public announcement that he wasn't going to review Ghostbusters 2016, by James making that announcement, people suddenly had something to talk about. It was a topic that was being added to the discussion surrounding that movie. And while Ghostbusters may have flopped, guess what? There's been 2 other Ghostbusters movies since. I don't think that would have happened if people were flat out indifferent to the 2016 movie. If you want studios like Lucasfilm to stop cranking out shows that you don't like, indifference is the enemy. When people stop talking about your thing, that's when you know you're in trouble. Take it from me, the guy with 20 subscribers. Just don't get mad that Disney keeps making crappy Star Wars shows when you guys can't stop talking about it, because bad publicity is still publicity. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!